you're up. It's a lovely evening. It is, as always, an honor to see you. Unbelievable, really. Think of the circuitous path your life must take to find yourself here. Take this as a good sign. Now, you may be slightly disoriented. In fact, I would expect it. It's important for you to try and relax if you can. That's why you're here, or rather, in order to achieve your desired outcome, you need to be in a state of relaxation. You might find yourself looking around a bit and wondering why you're here, why I'm here, where is here, who are you, what are we doing? You know, the easy stuff. I'm happy to explain all of that to you. As you know, and you know this, whether you're actually aware of it right at this moment or not, you do know this, and it is something that would come back to you given enough time. But given that time is one of the reasons that we're here, probably better for me to just fill you in as best I can in the time that we have. In case part of your memory is returning, leading you to question, say, certain symbols or names, I would remind you that Sator is dead. And the corporation that he founded under your guidance realigned itself to a more worthy cause. I have to say, when I was enlisted, I never thought I'd see this day. So the technology of a turnstile, as you're well aware, while potent, has adverse knock-on effects that make it less than ideal, to use very often, certainly. And this is something that I think was apparent to most when they thought about it. The idea that we could invert the entropy of a living being instantaneously with no ill after effects. And it's probably pretty naive, if we're being honest. You can't expect to introduce something to the world that you don't fully understand, that is changing something on such a fundamental level, and not have some unexpected side effects. So it seems the sudden and radical change in a living creature's entropy caused problems even beyond those that we initially saw, making it difficult to breathe, impossible to breathe inverted air. Essentially, the individual molecules and cells making up our bodies going through inversion causes them to behave in a way that, again, don't blame you for this, but when we even think of chirality, how the left hand and right hand version of a molecule can be the difference between life and death. And yet we don't really think about, or we didn't. And perhaps this was because we had to do what we had to do. That's better. Because we had to do what we had to do, we ended up overlooking, fast-tracking. I wouldn't even say overlooking, really. We knew that there were things that we were leaving out of the equation, as it were. But the effect was that inverting a person, even when we give them inverted oxygen, at the intensity and rates that we were doing it, the mechanics of the turnstile, etc. This was a strain on biological material, causing long-term effects that, unfortunately, you are all too aware of. And so, where we are now, and what we are doing now, is something that I wish we had discovered before. Essentially, the easiest way to look at it, and if you don't mind, I do need to start getting you into your relaxed state to help with this transition. And so I will begin with an inverted object here. Why on earth was this inverted? I'll never know. But what we begin to understand was that you can't invert someone on a dime. Or you can. We did. But that's what got us where we are now. And that many of the effects of inversion, the harmful side effects of inversion, could be bypassed if we just did things a little slower. And that is what you and I are doing now. Think of it as the difference between spinning on your heel and an oil tanker turning around at sea. When you're dealing with massive objects, you have to take into account that mass. When inverting, and mass, of course, is energy. So even something that seems not so massive, but contains a lot of energy, really needed to be treated as if it were physically massive as well. And so this chamber that you are in, that I am in as your custodian, is itself part of a much larger complex that is essentially a humongous turnstile the size of a city block. And we thought regular turnstiles were expensive. So what is happening and has been happening since your arrival in this chamber is we have been performing a 3-point turn in time. Try not to pay attention to what may sound like explosions. We're safe here. Things are happening to matter outside this chamber. That we can't control. So we deal with it. And we are in the process of slowly inverting you really. I should be wearing my lead gloves to do this. Although, let's be honest with each other. It might be a little too late for such precautions. So, we created this method of gradual inversion, really no different than your regular inversion, just done gradually. And the adverse effects were mitigated. To the point where there might be none. Hard to tell. Time reveals all things. But we are slowing down now. You may have a sensation in the pit of your stomach. Of course, just like if we accelerate at a rate of 1g, we don't notice it. It is only the delta between these two states that gives our perceptive abilities notice of the change. So one might wonder, what is the normal rate of time? We're feeling it slow because we're changing it. But were we to stop changing it and simply coast at the slowed speed, you would have no sense of it being slowed. unless we had a relative marker by which to measure our slowed progress. And so it is very difficult to know the truth about time and speed, velocity, spatially, temporally. These are things that we've lived with and we've come to acclimate ourselves to. It never did give us any more life. And I think secretly we were all hoping that it would. That it might be the gateway that it might be the gateway. A gateway to discovering how to slow the decay of our bodies. Alas, in that respect, anyway, it has not done much whether you're inverted or not. To you, you're still aging. We still don't even really know what time is. And how we experience it, and how it like a movie. The idea that you're jumping from frame to frame perpetually, always in fear of falling between the frames. And of course, any system like this, it necessitates the omega frame, the final frame. The credits must roll. But it is funny how we take a thing like time and we assign so many properties to it based on observation, and it comes to mean so much to us. And I suppose that is why we're really here now. Observation is a ridiculous predictor. If observation were a reliable predictor of future behavior, then the longer one lived, the longer one would assume they would live. An 80-year-old man would take his 80 years of existence as evidence that surely he must have another 80 years, and another, and another, and as soon as he stops being capable of observing, and then it all goes out the window. But we slow down as the oil tanker comes to its midpoint. There is technically a moment, although we will not be able to perceive it, where time is halted. We're moving forward. We slow, easing into an inversion. And I want to say for a brief moment, but without invoking Zeno's paradox, I don't know that we can refer to it as a moment. And yet we must pass through that plane where we go from moving forward to becoming inverted. No matter how slowly we approach it, in fact, the slower we're moving, in theory, the longer we would be near that point of stasis. I feel like we are approaching that point. Very soon. Any moment, in fact. I mean, I'm sure you can feel it. I'm hearing it. Each of us rides on the crest of a wave. It crashes, we know not when or where. The system is inherently unstable. The system is inherently unstable. It crashes, we know not where or when. Each of us rides on the crest of a wave. I feel like we may have passed the threshold. And so, in the end, This did not allow us to cheat death. Everything still has to add up. And I'm sorry. That you could not get more. Nothing to worry about. Perhaps some of your memories coming back to you now. There is some bizarre comfort to be had in the notion that we only exist for the briefest of moments on the scale of the universe, and we do not grieve for the time that existed, the billions of years that existed prior to our birth. These eons that did not have the pleasure of our presence don't concern us. And so while we were not able in the end to achieve what I think many of our hopes were regarding this technology, and perhaps that is for the best, we are able to perform some feats of I don't want to diminish them by calling them sleight of hand. And yet, what we are talking about are palliative efforts to deal with one's own passing. Well regulated. And thus, people started to think about ways to die. in ways that are more comforting than others. Obviously, not all deaths are equal. There are horrifying ways to die and comparatively pleasant ways to die. As a society, we don't tend to openly look into pleasant ways to die, and this may be in part because we know a deep truth in our bones that if we were to make death something that truly was not feared, everyone would opt out, and we'd be left with the self-flagellators, those who feel they need to punish themselves by existing. We wouldn't want that. And yet, as with any new technology, one cannot predict It's strange when I use words like that, predict. And I realize the word doesn't mean anything anymore. One, in the moment of unveiling technology for the first time in their individual timeline, cannot know what possible benefits or applications of that technology might be forthcoming. Remember this. And remember how we once so carelessly dropped things simply to prove that they were inverted. Who drops things from several inches high and they're putting something back? Especially something valuable. You'd think that would be frowned upon. So, this technology to invert people and to now be able to do it in such a way that it causes very little discomfort for the person being inverted. It didn't take long for the idea to come about. Since we are so very much unafraid of the time that we have not existed prior to coming into existence. And since we have uncovered this method of moving through time in such a way that while the line remains unbroken, in a spatial sense, we are not teleporting. We are simply given another dimension in which to move. And so it didn't take long for people to start to think, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be wonderful if my life could be a circle? Donut, toroid. Hardly a perfect circle by any means. Keenan's presence notwithstanding, and so we arrived to where we are now, to where you are now. And I proudly volunteered beginnings and endings, predictions, forecasts, looking back, history. These words no longer mean what they once did. And the ability, the thought, a very powerful philosophical thought, even if it doesn't really hold up to close scrutiny beyond a philosophical level. Oh yes, consensus. Picking up speed again. The thought that we could choose to expire at the exact time and place of our own birth. Captured the imagination of those who had the means and the necessity to choose such an end. And so we were able to accelerate and decelerate and invert. So that I could chaperone you back to the moment when you were born. Now, I won't be able to accompany you outside of this chamber, So there will be some footwork for you to do. I suspect it is not enough for you merely to expire on the same day when you were born. You're going to want to be temporally and spatially in the same place, perhaps. I know you're clever. You'll be able to be your own obstetrician. Although, as you would not be around beyond the first cry, perhaps you'd be better off assisting in the birth or merely observing. Is it wonderful? It's what you want. It makes you happy. Would that I could give you more life. I would. When you leave this chamber, be on the lookout for elements that were placed to help guide you. And we have arrived. You're going to need to find the hospital. As I said, you're going to need to do some legwork. You should have the strength to do the legwork. You have the capsule. It is real this time, I assure you. Just be on the lookout. When you're looking, searching, trying to find your way, I can help you, obviously, without leaving the chamber. You need to keep your eyes open and watch for good signs. Here. Take this. To find yourself, think about what a circuitous path one must take. Unbelievable, really. An honor to see you. It is, as always, a lovely evening. So, you're up.